Sorry, let me get that little thing that I have.
President Trump and I often say peace and strength. First comes strength, then comes peace.
Right.
Tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you. God bless America. God bless Israel. God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith. Okay, so there you have it. That was the message from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanking the Trump administration in conjunction with an update on Operation Rising Lion that we have been following ever since last Thursday when I was on the air with you when Israel launched those preemptive strikes on sites in Iran here. So what we want to do right now, because there's a lot of moving pieces to this story, it is fluid, it is breaking, it is developing. If you missed it live, we want to play it yet again. This was very brief from President Trump.
Oh, that's very
Let's re-rack it. Let's show it to you in case you might have missed it.
Here it is, guys.
Thank you very much. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the three key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services at this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisen-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God, I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so Andrew Kraft back here wanted to replay that for you in case you might have missed it, saying that he and Netanyahu worked as a team, congratulating the Patriots who flew the bombers and the planes, congratulated the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, raising Cain, and says this could not continue, saying we needed peace, saying also there are many targets left, say he will go after other targets if deals are not reached. And so, yet again, as he has done throughout the course of this entire story, leaving the door open, yet again, to diplomacy. We'll see if that's actionable or operative at all in the wake of this. In the meantime, though, I want to go out to Capitol Hill. We have a live picture there in Washington. It's a little bit after the 10 o'clock hour there in D.C. Chad Pergram reporting this, that it wasn't only the Israelis that got a heads up. A senior White House official saying the White House gave a courtesy heads up to congressional leadership. That's, of course, Senate Majority Leader John Thune. That's, of course, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. And I would imagine the Democrats also in charge in the minority, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and also House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Speaking of Hakeem Jeffries, he put out a statement saying this. Donald Trump
Oh shoot, sorry, I had it reversed.
He's failed to deliver on that promise. The risk of war is now dramatically increased, and I pray for the safety of our troops in the region who have been put in harm's way. President Trump misled the country about his intentions, failed to seek congressional authorization for the use of military force, and risks American...
No, he doesn't need that permission, guys. Remember that. He doesn't need that.
Jeffrey says, first, the Trump administration bears the heavy burden of explaining to the American people why this military action was undertaken. Second, Congress must be fully and immediately briefed in a classified setting. Third, Donald Trump shoulders complete and total responsibility.
Yeah, I agree with you, Katsung. I agree. I agree.
That flow from his unilateral military action here. In the meantime, back out live there.
Like this video, guys.
Also, some other news made in that very, very short statement by the president that at 8 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow morning, there will be a press briefing at the Pentagon. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth will be there, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Cain, will be there as well, taking questions from reporters. So, of course, here on Live Now from Fox, we will be showing you that press conference live in its entirety. 8 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, Sunday morning, 5 a.m. Pacific Time. In the meantime, we still have my colleague and friend, of course, National Security Analyst and Expert and retired Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kemper, still on the horn after so many hours. Hal, you and I have been on the air for so many of these historic moments. I would say that this is one of the most major ones, and it's always a pleasure. And I know you're traveling, and so we thank you for your time. So I got to ask, and you heard me say this question, what now? You heard Hakeem Jeffries in that statement saying that the president needs to reaffirm, explain to the American people why this was needed. Did he do that in that brief statement?
Andrew, I kind of listened to it. I think he kind of did. I don't think there's any more explanation that needs to be put out there. I think he kind of explained the imperative of why the strikes took place now. He also outlined some things that I was kind of curious about, which was how much communication was there, coordination, if you will. They informed leaders of Congress, which I thought was really good. That was something that, the president should do, but I was glad to see that did happen. It also kind of cleared up any doubts about how well this was coordinated with Israel. It had to be coordinated to a high degree, simply because they had to deconflict airspace and a lot of other things. So it wasn't like Israel was going to be caught off guard that we were sending B-2 bombers into Iranian airspace, or that we were launching Tomahawk missiles. So that all had to be coordinated regardless in terms of what was happening there. But I think probably one of the biggest things there, and by the way, he did kind of illuminate the battle damage, if you will, in terms of how much destructive force was used. He basically clarified as if there was any doubt that the Fordo facility was gone, and that the other two sites were also, essentially neutralized. But the other thing was, what is the intent going forward? And on the one hand, he's handed out the olive branch, if you will, saying, look, diplomacy, at the same time, he's raised a sword of Damocles and saying, or, and I think he's made that very clear. And he's also said, not only is the sword of Damocles here, we have a list of targets that we're looking at. In other words, planning, preparation, the forces are in place, everything to follow up on that, which I have to tell you, when you're negotiating on the national security side of the house, it is good to have a very credible threat in hand to say, let's try and work this out, or here's the alternative.
Okay.
And I think you removed all doubt that the U.S. will launch or do something because, well, frankly, we just did it.
Yeah.
So
Hal, I have to say there's kind of two thoughts in my head right now at the same time, maybe President Trump's too, is, you know, he left open the door for diplomacy. He used the word deal again, but said if that is not operative, that there also is the door open for more strikes and more targets from the United States. And so I think a lot of people are asking, our viewers are maybe asking themselves, you know, what next? Will there be more? Is that safe to ask that question, the uncertainty of that right now? It's kind of wait and see, is it not?
I think it is a wait and see. On the other hand, that's a very legitimate question to ask.
Okay.
And what he has done is he has removed the doubt that the U.S. is prepared to do more than what we just did. The question is, was this a proverbial one and done? Was this going to be our sole thing that we were going to do in that conflict and then walk away? And he's left it open that no, we're ready to do more. Of course, the other part of this is what will be the Iranian response? Will they start targeting U.S. bases in and around the Arab or Persian Gulf? Will they, start doing some other things around the world, using their proxy network or their clandestine network or something like that? What will be the Iranian response to this? And of course, that will help drive what our follow-on actions would be to counter that response and to deal with the nation state of Iran. So he's kind of left this wide open, but it's rather interesting. You know, I really think, look, how did we get here? He opened up that 60-day window. He said, look, I'm going to have 60 days to negotiate something with Iran. And Iran basically did what Iran always does in these negotiations, which is they kind of played around, they wouldn't make concessions, and they come back with this over-the-top rhetoric and stuff, like we're not going to do anything, and blah, to the point that I think at one point they were almost asking for Israel to surrender. It was like, the language almost that strong. It wasn't quite that way, but I was like, really? That's how you're going to negotiate this thing? And I was listening to this, and I was like, we're really not making a lot of progress here. And literally at the end of the 60 days is when Israel started these strikes. And I think that clearly sent a message that this diplomatic overture is something you might want to pay a lot of attention to, because it's not just rhetoric.
Okay.
You know, you fail to do it, there will be consequences. And I think that at this point, with President Trump saying what he just said, the consequences side of that is absolutely unambiguously clear to Iran. What will happen going forward?
I see. You know, Hal, all week I've been asking you the question and posing it this way, that Israel couldn't strike these sites, these nuclear sites, without our help. And so maybe our viewers are wondering, you know, what did Israel do to assist? Or was this completely unilateral on the United States' part here? Because I was under the impression that if we were going to do this, which we did, that Israel would be involved in some capacity, maybe with intelligence sharing, maybe with actual kinetic assistance here. So I think that's a really interesting question. And I have to get this on with you as well. The misdirection, the diversion, to me, has been so impressive, to the point, remember, there was a lot of talk today about this fleet of B-2 bombers, it was reported, flying towards Guam, west. And then you have to think, well, why would they be flying west? Jennifer Griffin reporting this. The mission followed reports, of course, of 6 B-2s taking off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri around midnight last night. While initial chatter suggested the aircraft were headed west toward Guam, Jennifer Griffin noted the true flight path was likely east, directly toward Iran, and what appears to have been a calculated deception. How much did that throw Iran off guard?
Well, I will say this: the art of war is deception, and misdirection. And this was very well done. It was, they said they're going west. I actually, to be honest with you, doing the math, they're like, you don't really gain much by forward deploying our bombers to Guam. And by the way, I should mention, I've been to Guam a lot. I've been on Anderson Air Force Base. I've seen the hangars where the B-2s are stored. I mean, I'm very familiar with that. But the math just doesn't support it. The only thing you really gain out of it is that if you're going to do a really long range mission out of Guam, you don't gain anything in terms of range. But if you're doing a long range mission, you may not have to overfly some places that you otherwise would have to overfly, which is kind of important when you're doing long range bomber missions. But there wasn't a whole lot that was gained from doing that. Now, what we're certainly seeing is they said, hey, we're going to Guam. Now, Guam is known to host B-2s. They have a facility to do so. They have a big hangar and stuff. So that would make sense, to say, okay, they're going to Guam, because that is the one place we acknowledge where we could actually put B-2s, other than White Air Force Base. So it's, it's like, okay, but it was complete misdirection. They launched. They can't really cover up the fact they've launched. I mean, literally, you can sit outside the base and watch them launch. So you can't really cover that part up, operationally speaking. But where they're going, once they get in the air, once they get at altitude, they're stealth bombers. You can't see them at night. They can change course and go another direction, which obviously they did. And so this was all part of, operational tactical deception. The other thing too, which you and I have talked about quite a bit, was the language that was being used. Within 2 weeks, that's what the president said. Within 2 weeks, that's what the White House was saying. Within 2 weeks, which the Iranians heard. Oh, great, we got 2 weeks, and some were saying, and nobody was wanting to disabuse them of that, because nobody was going to say exactly when they're going to do it.
Yeah.
But if you want to believe 2 weeks, you can. So the Iranians, I think, were pretty much caught off guard. They didn't expect this to happen when it happened, which is a big military strike. That's what you want. So. Yeah, it was very, I gotta tell you, I'm with you. This was very well executed, very well done. They achieved what they were trying to achieve, which is they caught the Iranians off guard. And of course, the airspace has to be completely coordinated with the Israelis. So, you knew that was gonna have to be a very integrated sort of approach regardless. By the way, I would mention, the Israelis also hit the F-14s. All right. So now, look, Iran doesn't have much in the way of fighter aircraft. Those F-14s are really old; they can't do much. But these are B-2 bombers. Their whole thing is stealth. And if an F-14 was to get in the air, was to find some way to get into proximity of a B-2 bomber, there is a potential threat that they could pose. Well, the Israelis took that off. They eliminated that. So there was a coordinated piece with the Israelis on this. It wasn't just us. The Israelis did something in coordination with this.
Okay. Al Kemper, we're going to leave it at that. We always appreciate your insight, especially on this historic occasion. Hal, thanks so much. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, back on live there to the White House. I want to put up this map so you can get a sense of the bunker bomb strategy there. So you just heard the president saying that Iran's key nuclear sites were quote-unquote completely and fully obliterated by U.S. strikes. From the comments you just heard at the White House tonight, hours after announcing the U.S. military had carried out strikes against 3 key nuclear facilities in Iran. The president also warned Tehran against carrying out retaliatory attacks against the U.S., saying Iran has the choice between peace or tragedy. So this is a breaking news update, as you know. Also, Iran's nuclear agency on Sunday, it's Sunday in Iran, confirming attacks took place on its Fordo, Isfahan, and Natanz atomic sites, but is insisting that its work will not be stopped. The Atomic Energy Organization of Iran issued that statement after President Trump announced the American attack on the facilities here. So there is confirmation from Iran that there was actual targets that were struck by the United States. Their state-run news agency, IRNA, reported early Sunday the attacks targeted the country's Isfahan and Natanz nuclear sites. The IRNA quoted an individual by the name of Akbar Salehi, that's Isfahan's deputy governor in charge of security affairs, saying there had been attacks around the sites, though he did not elaborate. Another official confirmed an attack targeting Iran's underground Fordo nuclear site here. So in the meantime, we do want to bring in more voices to the conversation, including my friend there at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, David Dawood. He's going to join us in just a moment here. All right, like I said here, David Dawood joining me. We are in full breaking news coverage here. I want to thank everyone for watching on this very late Saturday night. David, thanks for joining us on this late Saturday night, but it's a historic occasion, a historic, momentous occasion here. I'm going to ask a simplistic question that may sound somewhat glib and simplistic to viewers. Has the United States ever struck targets inside Iran? Have we ever used military force inside the country of Iran?
No, not to this extent. There was Operation Eagle Claw, which was meant to rescue American hostages that were held by affiliates of the government of Iran after the revolution. That unfortunately failed. The hostages were not rescued. They were released upon the President Reagan taking office. But this is unprecedented for the United States to have struck Iran at all internally and definitely in this manner.
So David, I have to ask this, and maybe this is unanswerable right now. I mean, President Trump did say Iran's nuclear program is completely obliterated after tonight here. How will we know that? Will we have, people on the ground who can confirm that? Yes, the president's saying that here, but as far as Iran's nuclear program, where does it stand right now? What phase is it in? Is it completely decimated, like the president says, or is it too early to know?
Well, right now I'd say it's too early to know. The Iranians themselves are saying that the fissile material.
I made some birria tacos, you guys.
Much earlier than the strikes they were claiming. Now, look, is that true? Is that a face-saving claim so they can walk down the de-escalatory ladder? Right now, these strikes put them in a position where they may have to respond in some fashion. They've been threatening to attack U.S. assets, U.S. personnel for some time. If any strike by the United States occurred in Iran now, it's time for them to put their figures of money where their mouth is, and they may not want to do that because there will be consequences. As President Trump said, "You attack us, we're going to keep attacking back." So it may be that this is their way claiming that the fissile material was moved to walk this back and not follow through on these threats. It may be true. I think time will tell more so than anything. We have the intelligence that the Israelis were able to gather on location of these sites, nuclear scientists. I mean, obviously that's going to be put into play to figure out what the state of Iran's nuclear weapons program, nuclear program period, particularly its nuclear weapons program, is after these strikes. But that may take some time to make that full assessment.
I mean, we have a live picture there over Jerusalem as the sun comes up right now, and obviously I don't have to say this, I'm going to reiterate it, but we know when Israel launched preemptive strikes last Thursday, Iran retaliated in kind, and it's been this tit for tat ever since. Now the dynamic of whatever Iran does in retaliation will look different. We have U.S. assets in the region in the form of materiel, in the form of troops, also American citizens in the region, many of whom, are being evacuated from Israel right now. If you're watching this right now from the United States, is it right to be concerned how Iran will retaliate? We don't know. Can they even? And what does that look like?
Again, there are a lot of question marks here. So the Israelis have been engaged, and now it's a 10-day campaign in Iran to degrade not just the nuclear weapons program, but they've also been striking the ballistic missiles program and other military assets. I think there was a strike on the Navy yesterday as well. So there's this degradation of Iran's ability to retaliate directly. Now, if we look at the ballistic missiles, in terms of their attacks on Israel, they've been decreasing in the quantity of barrages overall and the quantity of missiles within each barrage. I think last night or yesterday, there was one missile barrage, 5 missiles each. It's the lowest that's happened since the onset of the war. Now, simultaneously, the Israelis are saying that they've destroyed most of Iran's ballistic missile
Alright, let's give
launch.
another channel a chance.
Celebrate National Game Show Month on the Price is Right channel.
Exiting now at Western.
U.S. were to get more involved,
There he
we
is,
now
though.
have, of course. And interesting that the president tonight, in his very brief remarks, just about four minutes, I believe, made it very clear that he was working in close coordination with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm told that the U.S. gave Israel a heads up before these strikes tonight. We know that the president also spoke with him after the strikes. And of course, seeing those images of the president working closely with his team, they have met every single day this week, 4 meetings in the Situation Room, as you mentioned, here at the White House. Actually, one of the first indications of what was going on here tonight, we saw Marco Rubio, some of the other officials who were in the Situation Room out here on the driveway, making what appeared to be some urgent phone calls, and the president saying that we are going to be hearing directly from Secretary Hegseth and other military leaders tomorrow morning in a rare Sunday morning press conference. The question is what comes next, and as you noted, of course, the president isn't ruling out future attacks. The president making clear that there are many targets left, that he will not hesitate to act with precision, speed, and skill. It is not clear where this ends. And of course, what the ultimate impact is of these strikes on Iran's nuclear program. It's one of the reasons that the president for so long has urged and pushed for talks, even in recent days, hopeful that the U.S. could somehow get Iran back to the negotiating table, because without a deal, it's not clear. You may, certainly it would be a huge setback to Iran's nuclear ambitions, but how long will this last? How big will that setback be? These are all questions and things that we need to unpack, David.
Yeah, right now we're in a window of uncertainty for sure, and of course Iran had said earlier this week, Mary, that there would be retaliation if the U.S. Did directly get involved, which has played out here tonight. I wanted to ask you, I know that there has been reaction over on Capitol Hill, lawmakers applauding the president, Republican lawmakers, that there has been some division within the Republican Party in the build-up to this moment. And as you know, you covered the president out on the campaign trail as well, leading up to the election, that he campaigned often on staying out of costly foreign conflicts, away from American interventionism, promising to stay out of the Middle East. He also at the same time promised that Iran would never have a nuclear weapon. He's now involved tonight with Iran, and again, the question now, the uncertainty now, is whether and if Iran will respond in any sort of significant way.
Yeah, in many ways, David, this is exactly what President Trump was hoping to avoid. He promised on the campaign trail no more wars, that he was not going to drag America into another lengthy conflict in the Middle East. In fact, David, just last month, I was with the president in the Middle East at the largest U.S. military air base in Qatar. The president again there saying that his priority was to end conflicts and not start them. But in that same speech, speaking to thousands of American troops, he also said, if America is threatened, that he will respond with overwhelming and devastating strength and force. So yes, this is something that the president promised he would not do, but as you noted, he also long promised that Iran would not be allowed to get a nuclear weapon, and he has made clear in recent days that he feels that they were very close to having one. But we also know that as he made this decision about how he was going to respond, was he going to take the action that he has taken tonight, he was well aware of the deep divisions within his own party, which we really have seen play out very publicly this week. I'm thinking of that sparring between Senator Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson that so crystallized the division. So many of the president's supporters urging him to follow through on those promises not to get involved in further conflict. Others in the party, of course, urging him to not hold out for negotiations, but to go ahead and strike.
Mary Bruce at the White House. Mary, our thanks to you. I want to bring in our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl. John, we spoke last hour. I know that you talked with President Trump even before he addressed the nation tonight. We were both somewhat struck by the fact that you were able to get him on the phone, which signaled that he was very pleased with what he saw play out tonight, though the president obviously very clear, John, that this window now, this new uncertainty that exists, this new chapter that we're in, the potential for any sort of response from Iran or its proxies across the region. And you can see that actually in President Trump's social media post just a short time ago, warning once again against any kind of retaliation.
Yeah, echoing what he said in his speech to the nation, saying any retaliation by Iran against the United States will be met with a force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Very similar to what he told the nation, echoing pointing to the fact that this is a moment of tremendous uncertainty. Will what the United States did tonight, the most consequential decision Donald Trump has ever made, will it lead to a series of countermeasures by the Iranian regime and its proxies and its allies in the region, attacks on the United States, or will it lead to regime change in Iran? Will it lead ultimately to the collapse of the revolutionary government that has led Iran as an adversary, a fierce adversary of the United States for some 47 years, 46 years? So, David, what he's signaling is if it happens, if the first scenario happens and Iran strikes out at the United States in retaliation, something that Iran has vowed to do, that Donald Trump is prepared to escalate this. So where are we in terms of his promises of ending forever wars?
Here we go, guys. Trying to make us look bad.
Not an end to our conflict with Iran.
It certainly has reshaped the Middle East, and what it looks like, in the weeks and months from now. Obviously, we cannot say at this point, though, a significant move tonight on the part of the U.S. military, the instruction of the president to strike 3 major nuclear facilities inside Iran. Again, of course, Fordo is the one many of our viewers are familiar with, the most deep underground. John, stick with us. Again, John speaking to President Trump before he addressed the nation, the president expressing to John that he was very pleased with what he saw played out, and said it was tremendous success. And then addressing the nation 10 p.m. Eastern, speaking of these 3 facilities. I do want to bring in Martha Raddatz back with us this half hour. And Martha, the question going into tonight in this operation, he said there was a 2-week timeline. It turned out to be 2 days. Of course, we'll report this out whether or not that was part of the strategy here. The question was, B-2 bombers, would they be used? We know they were. We know they flew all the way or halfway around the world to get to the Iranian airspace. And we presume that they did use those 30,000-pound bombs they would have to reach deep beneath that mountain there in Iran.
That's exactly right, David. They would almost have to have used those massive ordnance penetrators that can go so deeply into that mountainside. That's what Israel was waiting for. That's what Israel wanted to go over Fordo, because it really truly is the only bomb that could penetrate that deeply. I think one of the things that will have to be checked clearly is that the president clearly said this was a tremendous success. They destroyed it. Whether they can get people on the ground to see if it is completely destroyed, because an underground facility can't really tell, although they certainly have ways to find out as much as possible. But I think one thing tonight, David, that we really do have to say, it is clear the U.S. is now at war with Iran. It is exactly what we've been talking about all evening, that this is what the president wanted to avoid, but we are now there. And as we brace for possible retaliation, certainly Iran has suffered great loss, but they are perfectly capable of going after U.S. troops, and there are 40,000 of them in the region, David.
It's a very important point, Martha. Martha, thank you. And again, Martha, underscoring the fact that we are, as a nation, the U.S. now at war with Iran tonight. The president warning again on social media moments ago what he said at the top of the hour in his address to the American people, warning against retaliation from Iran, saying there would be even greater force, greater speed from the U.S. if Iran or its proxies retaliate in any sort of way. I want to get right back to our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, who has been live on the ground in Tel Aviv for us many nights in a row now here. And Ian, for folks who are watching back here in the U.S., what particular threat do the American forces that Martha just spoke of, the tens of thousands who are spread throughout that region, what kind of threat do they face? You and I have been talking about how the air defenses in Iran have been significantly wiped out, perhaps 50% or more by the action taken by Israel in recent days. But that doesn't mean that there aren't ways for Iran and its proxies to retaliate.
Yeah, and that has been, in many senses, the speciality of Iran. It has contracted out its offensive operations. It's known as the world's #1 sponsor of terrorism. That's a phrase that we've heard repeatedly. The Houthi rebels inside Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas also in Gaza, but also other groups. It has been guilty of malign activities, and you have a heavy U.S. military presence throughout the region, in Iraq, in Syria, in Bahrain, and elsewhere. You have heavy diplomatic presence. We've seen diplomats being evacuated from here along with their families, and diplomatic presence elsewhere in the region reduced. We were reporting on World News just 24 hours or so ago about people American citizens trying to leave Iran, some reportedly experiencing difficulties doing that. So the US will be highly concerned about the potential for retaliatory strikes. Now, as you said, neutralize, that was their phrase, neutralize 50% of Iran's ability to fire missiles. Not necessarily the missiles themselves, but the launch systems. They said there's a bottleneck. In other words, it has plenty of missiles, its capacity to launch them. But when Israel said that it controlled the skies, what that looks like on the ground is there are Israeli drones constantly over Tehran. Something that would have been unthinkable just a couple of weeks ago, especially to the Ayatollah, and Iran's capacity to gather intelligence, to respond, to act without interception has been severely diminished. Its key allies, Russia and China, are standing to one side. They have no appetite to get involved in this. I mean, conversely, Russia has benefited because the price of its own energy supplies has skyrocketed. But there are concerns specifically about the oil supplies that come out of Iran. 20% of the world's oil supplies go through the Straits of Hormuz. We saw previously that the Houthi rebels inside Yemen were capable of striking US carriers as well as other international carriers. That is a group specifically that I think we should be watching. That will have an impact on oil prices, and the US doesn't depend on oil from that region in the same way that the Europeans and the Chinese do, for sure, but it will have a potential knock-on effect. So there are a number of ways that Iran could retaliate, but the president was very clear, we shouldn't lose track of that if Iran didn't acquiesce, that if it didn't sign up to some kind of peace process, there would be further action.
Ian, you and I both know that the president certainly has not talked about regime change in any sort of way, and certainly didn't tonight in addressing the American people. Instead, obviously talking about the desire to, and he said they were completely, totally obliterated when he talked about Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan, these 3 nuclear sites in Iran. But you can't help but to think about the future of the current leadership of Iran, and in particular the supreme leader, who the president has talked about in recent days. Obviously, too early to know, but it would seem the future for that supreme leader is somewhat in question.
Exactly, and we've heard again repeatedly from the Israelis. I mean, certainly when there was that very heavy strike here, when that hospital was hit, we had the Israeli defense minister directly blaming and threatening the Iranian supreme leader, suggesting that he would be a valid target. Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli president, who I spoke to, also said that he was a key part of the problem. But again, an Israeli military official talking to me on background was adamant that that wasn't part of the agenda. However, when you weaken an authoritarian regime like that, when you force someone like Ayatollah Ali Khamenei underground, he's not being seen in public apart from once or twice, that raises questions in people's minds. The regime lives and dies on its ability to project strength and actual physical coercive force on the ground, and that has been diminished. It has been suggested to us that the Israelis, as well as going after military targets, could go after state security targets. If those forces are no longer powerful, then it may well lead to further action. Certainly, Iranian, Persian friends that I know believe that people will respond on the ground. It's early days, we're not seeing it yet, but the capacity for self-generated change has now just gone up dramatically.
Okay, so Ian Connell, you bring up the very important point of the potential ways in which Iran could react across the region there. Ian Connell, tremendous reporting all week long, and we appreciate your coverage with us here on a Saturday night. Stick with us. I want to bring in Pierre Thomas, our Chief Justice Correspondent, back stateside, covering the domestic threat. Of course, people watching us here on a Saturday night, Pierre, want to know what is Iran's capability, not only to react overseas, throughout the region, with thousands of U.S. military stationed across the region.
Oh wow, he has a Hitler mustache. That's crazy.
We know that there are lone wolves, there are actors that certainly Iran would hope would want to react in some sort of way to the U.S. action we witnessed tonight. What are U.S. authorities here in the homeland prepared for potentially, and what have they said?
Well, David, one of the things they're most concerned about in the immediate future would be the potential for cyber attacks. Iran and its proxies have shown some capabilities to project from thousands of miles away. That's an immediate threat. DHS actually put out a notice just a couple of weeks ago after Israel started to attack Iran, warning the U.S. infrastructure, that's the electrical grid, energy sector, financial sector, to double check their computer systems to make sure that they have the proper defense mechanism. So that's a concern. There's obviously always been concern about the ability of Iran, to project inside the United States. Do they have operatives here? The U.S. government has made a number of cases involving Iranian operatives in the United States attempting to impact dissidents here, that sort of thing. Also, there would be concern about just a general reaction to the notion of the U.S. government, the U.S. military, taking a military strike to the homeland of Iran. So officials here will be looking at that kind of thing as well, David.
Pierre Thomas with us on the potential threat here at home as well. And of course, you say, Pierre, that what authorities within the administration are most concerned about at this point, and at this point, we point out it's very early, this sort of new chapter we're in, potential window of time here where there could be any kind of reaction, retaliation from Iran or its proxies. Most concerned about potential cyber attack, as Pierre said, though. There could be other operatives that the U.S. Is keeping its eye on as well. I want to bring in Rachel Scott, our senior political correspondent, and Rachel obviously covers the White House, Capitol Hill. She covered President Trump as a candidate. And Rachel, you heard Mary and I talking about this notion earlier that this is a president, obviously, who has campaigned, not just in this campaign when he was elected back to the White House, but in the campaign leading to his election in 2016 on campaigning against American interventionism, against American any kind of a role for the U.S. and U.S. military in the Middle East, any kind of increased role in these costly, dangerous conflicts. His supporters will say that's not in conflict with what he has also said about nuclear war, and that Iran should never get its hands on a nuclear weapon, and that's the case he's trying to make in these last couple of days leading up to this action that he authorized tonight.
Yeah, his supporters definitely, David, will say both things can be true here, that the president can be adamant that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, but also at the same time can still want to be a unifier, a peacemaker. You heard those calls for peace again today coming from the president as he addressed the nation again tonight. But there is no doubt this has created a divide within the Republican Party, even leading up to this. As we were reporting that the president was warming up to the idea of U.S. involvement, a possibility of striking Iran, we heard from a number of Republicans who did not want the president to move forward with this, who expressed concern and frustration about the U.S. being involved, primarily because of that campaign promise that the president made, that he was going to be a unifier, that he was going to be a peacemaker, that he was going to withdraw the United States from these ongoing foreign conflicts. This, of course, directly goes against that. It's at odds with that. At the same time, David, I will tell you that speaking to my sources and Republican members on Capitol Hill, the president received numerous calls from Republican lawmakers, even from Senator Lindsey Graham, who was urging the president to get directly involved. He wanted to see the United States join Israel's effort in this. And obviously, the president also, I'm told, getting a lot of pressure directly from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as well. We've also been working the phones, David. We are learning tonight that Speaker Mike Johnson and also Senate Majority Leader John Thune were in fact notified that the U.S. was going to be carrying out these strikes. We're also told that Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries was also notified as well, but given very little details. We are also told, David, from multiple sources that the Gang of Eight, this is the top leaders on Capitol Hill in both the Senate and the House, that they were not given a full briefing as the United States made this decision, the Trump administration making this decision to move forward with these strikes, David.
Rachel Scott covering this as well with us here tonight. Rachel, always great to have you with you and your context as well. I do want to mention the statement that's been released by the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, obviously. Video statement. He congratulated President Trump for his, quote, bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities. The United States, Netanyahu said, has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. And as you heard Rachel say, you heard other correspondents here along the way point out that this was exactly what Benjamin Netanyahu had been hoping for, that the U.S. Would become directly involved with Iran, which is what played out tonight. President Trump addressing the nation about 53 minutes ago now to let the nation know that the U.S. military has struck 3 nuclear sites deep inside Iran, Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. Obviously, Fordo is the site that, in particular, deep beneath the ground, beneath that mountain, B-2 bombers were used. We believe those 30,000 bombs were also used to target these sites. The president saying they are completely, totally obliterated, though we'll have to see in the hours and days to come what kind of assessment from international observers can be made about the damage done tonight, though clearly there was significant damage done. and the White House believes beyond repair in many cases. I want to bring in retired Colonel Steve Ganyard again with us. Steve, you and I have been talking about U.S. military capability, and regardless of where people stand on this politically, this was a significant use of force tonight, and something that has long been studied by not only this administration but administrations before it. President Trump, the president who has decided to move forward with this in a key moment when air defenses were significantly weakened in the skies over Iran, Israel essentially controlling those skies as U.S. B-2 bombers flew in tonight.
Yeah, David, John Carl is reporting
Hey,
that
guys.
Tomahawk missiles were also used in the strikes tonight. Now, Tomahawk missiles, as you remember, are cruise missiles, and they hug the earth, so they fly very low. And they aren't intended to do this deep penetration that we needed the B-2s for. So the point here is that it really was just the B-2 crews that were in danger tonight. We didn't put any other U.S. forces over Iran, so there was very little risk other than to those B-2 crews. Given how sophisticated the B-2 is, there's very little likelihood that the Iranians would be able to do anything about it. So the question will be, how far will the president be willing to go, depending on the Iranian reaction, in terms of deploying military force that may involve putting U.S. forces at greater risk than we saw tonight.
And of course, Steve, you heard the president there warn that if peace doesn't come quickly from Iran now, that we will go after additional targets with speed and with skill. We have that animation that shows what these bunker buster bombs can do. If we can show that, because a U.S. official now confirms that B-2 bombers dropped a number of massive ordnance penetrator bombs. As you know, that's the long term for these bunker buster bombs, 30,000-pound bombs. Now confirming to ABC News that they were used in this mission tonight over Iran. The official also confirming that a number of Tomahawk cruise missiles were fired at targets inside from a U.S. Navy submarine. You heard President Trump addressing the nation 10 p.m. Eastern here tonight. Brief words, and then getting on social media again shortly thereafter to warn Iran and its proxies against any sort of retaliation. But at first word tonight, which came shortly before 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, the president saying we have completed our very successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. All planes are now outside Iranian airspace. A full payload of bombs, he said, was dropped on that primary site of Fordo. That is the key site that is deep beneath sort of a range of mountains there. And we had reported for some time that it would probably take those bunker busters to actually do significant damage to that nuclear facility. And again, ABC News now confirming that those B-2 bombers did drop those 30,000-pound bombs. Our coverage will continue first thing in the morning for many of you. Your local news is next. Good night.
Oh, wow.
This has been a special
I got the very end. Thank you guys for watching.